Yeah, I mean, if there aren't questions that you want to answer on the Q&A, look at the chat. But the main one is the Q&A. Um, uh, it'll if you roll to the if you go to the bottom and hit Q&A, it'll appear there. I mean, it's more obvious when people ask questions. They'll be there. Yeah, it'll appear. It will. Hold on. The easiest thing is I can't ask a question because I'm the host. But as people ask questions, they will appear there. So yes, please. Yes. Yeah. 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 So I'm going to disappear off video to make sure everything is lined up properly. Uh, Absolutely fine. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody needs to see me. I need a haircut. Um, I no. Um, hmm. If you could ping those to me afterwards, I'll share them on our socials as well. That'd be cool. Um, okay, so hopefully everybody's sort of happy with what we're doing. Um, I mean, I'll like I said, I won't say anything and I'll be on mute. But if you need anything technically, I'll be here. I'll be in the chat as well. Just letting people know what's going on. Um, um, yeah. Uh, well, let's see. We've actually already got 10 people waiting on so five on Facebook and five on YouTube. I'm going to bring people. I'm going to start the webinar. Um, so that will bring people in on Zoom. So if you just give it 30 seconds, and then we'll start. Um, uh, well, yeah, or more or less. So I will press start webinar.
A founder of ASEN and its journal Nations and Nationalism, and I am delighted to welcome you, the viewers, and our three distinguished scholars from three different countries, from Greece, from America, and Germany, to this seminar, to this seminar online, while myself and our excellent ASEN coordinator are sitting in our offices in Great Britain. So this is the great miracle of the internet, to bring minds together, regardless of where they are physically located. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, and also I'd like to invite you to other ASEN events that are going to take place in the next few months. First of all, I'd like to invite you to our last online event of 2023, which is going to take place on the 6th of December, which is next week, next Wednesday. And it is going to be on Evian Leiddich's new book, The Women of the Far Right. You can find details for this event at asen.ac.uk/events. I'd like also to invite applications for the 2024 Anthony D. Smith Visiting Fellowship, which offers £5,000 for a 2-month stay at LSE Ideas. And for more information, please look at go to the internet and look for asen.ac.uk/Smith. And the last announcement that I'd like to make is again to invite applications for the 2024 ASEN Summer School that's going to take place at Zadar in Croatia in June 2024. Details for this event, for the summer school, you can find at asen.ac.uk/summer school. Now to go back to our today's event. Today we want to discuss the role of the past in the present. We want to think about how the past is transformed into a national past, a national history, how it is remembered, and how it shapes modern national identities. This is a major theme, as we all know, in nationalism studies. And this theme is raised in Professor Christina Koulouri's latest book, entitled Historical Memory in Greece, 1821 to 1930, Performing the Past in the Present. It is hot from the press. It was published this year in September by Routledge. You can purchase it as an ebook or as a hard copy. And we're going to discuss this book with two distinguished scholars, Professor Maria Kaliambou and Professor Rainer Liedtke. So before we immerse ourselves in hot debate about past and present, let me introduce very briefly our distinguished scholars. First, I'd like to introduce to you Professor Christina Koulouri. She's the author of the book that we're discussing today. She's professor in modern and contemporary history and rector of the Pantheon University of Social and Political Sciences in Greece. And Professor Koulouri is joined, and we are all joined by the two discussants, Professor Maria Kaliambou, who is a senior lecturer at the Hellenic Studies program at Yale University in America, and Professor Rainer Liedtke, who is professor of 19th and 20th century history at the University of Regensburg in Germany. All three of our speakers are distinguished for their scholarly work on the 19th and 20th centuries history, European history. So I invite first Professor Christina Koulouri to give us an outline of her book. Then we shall debate her book with Professor Kaliambou and Professor Liedtke. And then we shall open the floor or the air to contribution to questions and comments from our viewers. Professor Koulouri.
Well, hello everyone. I would like to thank the ASEN for hosting the presentation of my last book, and particularly Dr. Athena Leoussi, who took the initiative to organize this panel discussion. I'm also grateful to Dr. Maria Kaliambou from Yale and Professor Rainer Liedtke from Regensburg for taking time to read and comment on the book. Finally, I thank all the colleagues and friends from Pantheon University and elsewhere who attend this event. As Athena said, new technology allows us to hold the discussion literally across continents and beyond borders. It is amazing. I have to confess that it is difficult for an author to talk about her book, to summarize a research journey of more than 10 years in 10 minutes. I know every footnote, every step of discovery of new data. I remember where and when I discovered the pamphlet announcing the Daphnephoria Festival, with which I start my introduction, and more other documents, pictures, articles, books. Preparing my short presentation for this panel, I asked myself, well, a tough question, why did I write this book? Could the Greek case be of any interest to an international audience, especially in regard to nationalism studies since our host is ASEN? I will try to be brief, although the answers to these questions can be very long. So why did I write the book? This book was the offspring of my personal experiences on the battlefield of the national past in Greece and the Balkans, what we call history wars on the one hand, and I will explain what I mean, and on the other, the result of my academic journey researching national identities and the history of historiography. In Greece, history wars, the so-called history wars, have been raging recently over school textbooks, television shows, historical studies, and research programs. The primary battlefield is the conflicting memories of the German occupation from 1940 to 1944 and the Civil War, 1946 to 1949, a painful legacy that Greece only dared to confront in the 80s. Yet, even today, this cleavage pops up in public discourse, fueling political controversies and legitimizing rival ideologies. Of course, this is not a Greek exception. We are truly living in a time where the past is a hot topic, at once toxic and controversial. A veritable flood of commemorations, anniversaries, and the so-called memory wars have taken place over the last decades around the world. Personally, I could claim to be a veteran of history wars, since the 6 books I edited in 2005 and 2016 on history teaching in Southeast Europe triggered nationalist reactions across borders in the Balkans. We historians had to explain why it was crucial for our region to write and teach a non-ethnocentric, non-nationalistic history in our schools, and it was not evident. My book was born in this Greek and international context as an attempt to better understand the processes of construction of Greek national identity going back to the origins of the modern Greek nation-state. It was a coincidence, and not intentionally, that the Greek edition of the book appeared in the context of the celebrations of the bicentennial of the Greek Revolution of 2021. However, this coincidence gave more visibility to the book that was discussed and reviewed in Greek media and journals many times. As a matter of fact, this study is parallel to my whole academic life, and even before. It goes back to the time I was a student at the University of Athens. It is there that I discovered nationalism and the vast literature on nationalism studies. Since then, I have been researching different aspects of national identity and ideology, working on the history and geography textbooks in the 19th century for my PhD dissertation in Paris, on the history of sports and the Olympic Games for a number of books I wrote or edited, trying, among other things, to explore the linkages between body exercise and nationalism, on national anniversaries, etc. During my sabbatical leave at Princeton University in 2017, I discovered memory studies, and I decided to integrate my previous writings with new research on this topic. My main reference was Jan Assmann's work on communicative and cultural memory. Communicative memory is living, short-term memory pertaining to autobiographical memory of the recent past, supported by everyday communication, while cultural memory is memory of long duration, institutionalized and standardized, and is transmitted through a great variety of means that serve to codify and stage it. In employing a methodology based on Assmann's cultural memory, I deliberately place emphasis on the link between memory and identity, namely historical memory and national identity. I chose to study historical memory as a form of cultural memory, using the definition by Jan Assmann, and drew my sources from the corpus of visual representations and all forms in which the past was performed in the public sphere. This choice was dictated by the realization that the irrational, emotional perception of the past through images is much stronger than the rational understanding of it through sources. Through a multi-layered synthesis, this book aims to help us to understand the first century of the Greek nation-state. The period, catalytic for contemporary national identity and memory, begins in 1821 with the birth of the modern state and ends in 1930 when the first centennial of the Greek Revolution was celebrated. The analysis centers on the cultural practices through which the past was represented, staged, performed, and consumed in the public sphere. The realms of memory, to use the famous term coined by Pierre Nora, both material and symbolic, constructed during this period, have shaped the way Greeks today recall the Greek Revolution, the pantheon of heroic figures, the relationship between ancient and modern Greece, and the perception of Byzantium. Simply put, this book is a social and cultural history of the collective memory of that first critical century in the life of the Greek state, a time when the canon of historical memory was formed, which, in my opinion, continues to define and bolster national identity today. Finally, this book puts the Greek case in a European and global context in order to study the emergence of modern historical consciousness and of a modern regime of seeing the past in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Rooted in the era of Romanticism, this we may call spectacular historical consciousness was marked by curiosity about history and the visible remnants of the past, a desire for spectacles representing historical figures and events, and performed revivals of historical periods and episodes. Emphasizing people's desire to see and live the past, this book makes use of a large variety of sources such as oil paintings, lithographs, photographs, monuments, mnemonic ceremonies and national holidays, historical pageantry, tableaux vivants, revivals of ancient drama and ancient customs, parades, and popular commercial spectacles such as the panorama and the shadow theater. Empathy and the dramatization of history, the pursuit of authenticity through verisimilitude, and ultimately deception and illusion are approached as elements of the modern historical consciousness emerging almost simultaneously throughout Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Koulouri, for this short but very condensed and suggestive presentation of your book. Can I invite our discussants to comment on the book and the short presentation? Professor Kaliambou.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are. And thank you also from my side to all the organizers for this gathering and for all the events you have been organizing so far. Thank you, David and Athena, for this kind invitation. I would like to congratulate the author Christina Koulouri for her contribution to scholarship. And I wish Christina lots of strength to continue her excellent work on all fronts, both academic and administrative. As we know, you're overloaded with work, right? And it's amazing that you can do so many things, both administrative and academically. So, the book seamlessly combines interdisciplinary rigor, intellectual sharpness, and vivid writing. But I think it is the big asset for me. It is mostly inspirational. And I'm thankful to Professor Koulouri for achieving this actually rare balance in a scholarly book. We could discuss several issues raised in the book. I would like to focus on 3 topics, and if we have time, then we can talk about more. So the 3 issues I would like to discuss with you are, first, folklore. Folklore as a historical source, and you may know that my academic background is history and folklore, and I would like to stress out the interdisciplinary value of the book to several fields. Second, I would like us to discuss about Germany, the German admiration of the Greek historical past. The historical memories conceived by Germans influenced the perception of the Greeks of their own past. And third, I would like us to make a move to another continent, namely to America, the historical memory in the Greek diaspora, particularly in the United States. So let me explain. So my first point, folklore as a historical source. Koulouris' book skillfully employs a variety of visual and performative sources spanning from high to low, from top to bottom, from elite to popular usage. Christina Koulouri utilizes a wide range of folklore material, an aspect that would be the envy of any conscious folklorist. For instance, the book delves into popular books, folk paintings, folk theater, such as shadow theater Karagiozis, traditional costumes, popular parades, and many more. The book advocates for considering popular culture and folklore material as reliable sources of historical insight. And here, at this point, I remember an important statement by Professor Robert Darnton, whom I met at Princeton years ago. It's a book historian and historian of pre-revolutionary France, who said that folklore is a historical source. Darnton's work on French folktales, he argued that folk stories are not only narratives, but historical statements, which can help us understand sociocultural patterns. And Christina Koulouri further demonstrates how folk sources play a pivotal role in shaping cultural memory and forming national identities. She makes evident the intricate relationship between scholarly and popular historical culture. The book also pays attention to the performative turn in folklore anthropology, nationalism studies, and humanities in general. The book recognizes the transformative impact, the driving force of performance since the 1960s, and especially in American folkloristics. The book captures the evolving dynamic in all these fields. And let me make a statement here. Koulouri's book serves as an excellent textbook for folklorists in Greece. Unfortunately, in the landscape of Greek folkloristics, some folklorists represent an outdated, conservative, and myopic view of folklore sources. So this book is a new guiding light for disciplines lacking a robust theoretical apparatus. It bridges successfully folklore with history. So now I would like to move to my second point, Germany. I would like to think us about the international and transnational connections Greece has fostered throughout its history. The book explores the complicated web of relationships that Greece has maintained with other European countries. It reflects on the genesis of the visual canon shaping the national memory of the revolution. Interestingly, this canon was formed in the 19th century outside of Greece, particularly in Germany. The historical paintings and portraits by Peter von Hess and Karl Kratzeisen, to name a few, commissioned by the kings Ludwig I and Otto. This played a pivotal role in forming the fundamental narrative that continues to influence perceptions of the past. This canon has been embraced and internalized by both high and low strata of Greek society. Before the formation of the modern Greek canon, Germany adored also classical Greek antiquity. And here, let me share with you some personal experiences from my graduate years in Munich. At the Grand, if you have been to the University of Munich, the Grand Auditorium has a Greek inscription on the front, and it reads in Greek, Actis aeliou kaliston phos, which translates to a ray of Helios, most beautiful light. And this inscription is derived from Sophocles' tragedy Antigone. And these words suggest the power of the education, the enlightening influence that knowledge can bring to individuals and society. In close proximity to the University of Munich, at Königsplatz, visitors can immerse themselves in the triumph of neoclassicism. In the Propylea, the city gate resembling the monumental entrance to the Athenian Acropolis, the names of the heroes of the Greek Revolution are inscribed in Greek. Botzaris, Karaiskakis, and many more. This example demonstrates the integration of neoclassical aesthetics and the commemoration of modern Greek revolutionary figures, creating a poignant connection between the classical past and the revolutionary present. Christina Koulouri, in her book, compellingly illustrates that antiquity and the Greek Revolution represent the, I quote, unequal pasts which form the foundation of the modern Greek historical memory. And let's keep two key points here. The national symbols were created outside Greece's borders, whatever border might have meant in 19th century in Germany, and were derived from highly selective and unequal historical narratives. And now I come to my third point, and I will conclude. Let's move now to a different continent. Let's move to America. Ethnic traditions hold their power in the modern world, as Anthony Smith has taught us. Particularly in the diaspora, in Greek America, these traditions are central to the everyday lives of immigrants. History as social memory, in the words of Peter Burke, manifests in theater performances, parades, school books, educational material, architecture, art, etc. All of these aspects contribute to keep the traditions alive and teach the next generations about the glory of great men. Moreover, as Christina Koulouri writes, the spectacle of history is also prevalent in Greek American experiences of historical events. For instance, the Greek Revolution serves as the foundational event of the collective identity of Greek Americans. So celebrating the revolution is an integral part of their community life. Greek Americans have celebrated the revolution since they began to arrive here in the United States at the end of the 19th century. As early as 1893, we have the first source that the Greek society in New York, Brotherhood of Athena, organized and sponsored the first public parade for Greek Independence Day. The narratives about the revolution in America blend reality and fantasy. They oscillate between history and mythology. In fact, these historical narratives function as modern myths. Societies need selective, glorious myths to feel proud of their ancestors. Heroes and heroic actions of eponymous or anonymous people of the revolution create a continuously charged genealogy of impressive and fascinating ancestors. These narratives strengthen the feelings of pride and belonging in the Greek American community. And moreover, for Greeks here in the diaspora, these myths carry one more additional value quality, the one of connecting with their beloved home. They can replace the severed umbilical cord. Thus, these stories have an existential weight to the historical awareness of Greeks in the diaspora. And just if I may make one brief advertisement, recently I published an edited volume about the Greek Revolution and the Greek diaspora in the United States, where actually it reflects some of the points that Christina Koulouri has made about the national historical awareness of Greek diaspora. So let me conclude and sum up my 3 points. The book, Historical Memory in Greece, Performing the Past in the Present by Christina Koulouri, inspires scholars across several disciplines, such as history, archaeology, folklore, ethnology and anthropology, sociology, literature, and more. Its methodological and theoretical strength is evident in its depth and breadth of its exploration. Second, one topic that I would like to discuss, deserving discussion, is Greece's interdependence with Germany, which the book aptly scrutinizes. And furthermore, the themes discussed in the book find resonance in the experience of the Greek community abroad, particularly in the United States. And this connection underscores the applicability of the book's insights in different historical and geographical contexts. And thank you, and I would love to open the discussion.
Thank you very much, Maria. Can I invite Professor Liedtke to comment?
Yes, first of all, let me say I've been told that my sound is not great today. Apologies for that, but I cannot change it, unfortunately. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this event. I've worked with Christina Koulouri for many years now on different projects, so I was very happy to have been asked to comment on this book. You will realize that I also like the book, and I will try to tell you why. In the introduction, Christina Koulouri talks about memory wars and memory industry, and both are huge areas for some time now. Whenever we switch on the news, we witness the instrumentalization of history for political purposes, be it in the current Israel-Hamas war, be it in the case of Ukraine versus Russia, the controversies maybe surrounding post-colonial issues in Britain, France, wherever. On the other hand, tourists going, for example, on a city trip within Europe, they often visit museums. They visit memorial sites, they visit statues and monuments, and these give them a sort of, in very much inverted commas, clear view of the way the place wants its history to be represented. And a lot of money is being made that way as well. Students also seem to have picked up on that trend. At least at my universities, there are now more students studying for the Master in Public History, which also emphasizes everything around commemoration and presentation of history rather than studying history pure and simple. So I think it is very high time that we are having a serious and well-crafted academic study of the historical memory of Greece. And Christina Koulouri's study succeeds, in my opinion, in incorporating various layers of memory from various epochs. It effortlessly includes antiquity, Byzantium, the revolutionary period, as well as the modern Greek state up to the Asia Minor Catastrophe. And it is mainly, but by no means only, the experience of violence in some shape or form, wars, occupation, being refugees, dealing with refugees, and so forth, that shaped cultural memory, we learn. Or at least that is what is most visible in the commemoration as far as the book goes. It is much more difficult to ascertain other instances of memory of everyday life, for example, but the book also does that to a certain extent if you just think about the Fustanella, for example. I think it's simply the wealth of material that is being researched and presented here, which is most astounding. And maybe also having the courage to deal with so many different forms of presentation of memory. I think an art historian would get a heart attack because so many different examples are regarded, and one, in the mind of the art historian, probably one cannot possibly know everything about them. But Christina Koulouri can. At least the reader has the impression that the author knows what she's doing. And that is, I think, no small feat. So being able to convey a serious academic message, but in a way that a non-expert audience also can understand it and even feels captivated at times, that is a talent not all historians possess. I think we can learn a lot from the book about cultural practices through which the past was represented and all the performative aspects of this process, as well as the perspective of the public consumption of this production of memory. And from the study of Greek memory culture, we can get a deeper understanding of the utilization of memory today, independent of the country. I see many parallels to what Christina Koulouri describes to past and contemporary instances, for example, in my country, in Germany. For example, when it comes to nation building during the first German nation state, the German Empire, from 1871 onwards, where the basis for building up a cultural memory was much thinner than in Greece. And much more sort of adventurous constructions had to be made to achieve this. So going back to Germanic tribes, which clearly were somewhat less refined than the people who built the Parthenon, was one example. And maybe I can be allowed a little personal observation. It has always struck me, since coming to Greece for the very first time in the early 1990s, and then many times again, how important antiquity is for forming cultural memory in Greece today, at least on the surface, how comparatively little attention is being paid to Byzantine times. And I think Christina Koulouri's book manages, in a sense, to draw equal attention also to Byzantium and the period of Ottoman rule. And it demonstrates also that there are memory cycles when it comes to the political utilization. A good example is contrasting Kolokotrones and Paleologos and their memory rankings, so to speak, showing that during the Balkan Wars, this Byzantine ruler was so much more in fashion than this chieftain of the Morea, because obviously there was a window of opportunity maybe to take Constantinople again. I think it was a very good decision by Christina Koulouri not to organize the book according to historical epochs, but according to themes, according to methods, places, techniques of memory display, of memory generation. And this is why the book can also be used as a work of reference by someone who is maybe only interested in certain aspects of memory production, but not in the whole Greek story. And this is why I hope at least the book will be regarded well beyond the realm of specialists in Greek history, also by scholars of memory studies more generally. A good example here, and one could talk about many, is the historical panorama, which today is largely forgotten. Here, it's in a way being rescued by Christina Koulouri through an in-depth description of various panoramas, which during the 19th century, their 19th century heyday, they were immensely popular and very, very powerful in memory construction and simply the understanding of history. They were commercial ventures usually, but maybe especially because of that, a lot was being done to let as many people as possible to see them. And that certainly shaped historical images, in the truest sense of the word, of masses of people. The focus of the book is on images in various shapes and forms. Sometimes one wonders whether the incorporation of text-based sources would also have been beneficial. One of the types of sources I can think of adding something valuable would be school textbooks, which are particularly representative of changing official representations of the past and so forth. But admittedly, that would have required a rather different approach. So as Christina herself in her initial talk made clear, this study is not the product of research and writing of 1 or 2 years. It's in a way the detailed summary in English of research, teaching, debating Christina Koulouri has done over many years in her capacity as an academic, but also historian in the public sphere in Greece as an active agent in memory production herself, and that makes it even more valuable. I have one major criticism, which I've saved for the end, and that is simply the study stops in 1930. There are good reasons for that, but it's also a shame. So the way I see it, Christina Koulouri has to continue to be in good health for quite somewhat time, show her customary tenacity in doing research for many, many more years, so that she can devote attention to the second century of the modern Greek state. And maybe we can come together again in the early 2030s and celebrate the sequel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rainer. Can I invite questions from our audience, our viewers? Can I just kick off by asking, can I ask, is there a difference between the folkloric memories, which are, maybe you can see them as much more spontaneous and authentic? Is there a difference between the folkloric memorialization of the past and official commemorations, the parades that are organized by the state?
It's a question for me or for Maria?
For Christina.
Okay.
I think this is, if I may, this is a very good question because it touches, the folklore as it is intertwined with history. This is a very good question, and yes, we need that. That's what the book answers on that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and well, because I try to show also how folklore was instrumentalized. I mean, it's not just so there is not such a distinction between popular action or top down and there is. It was also a surprise to me that actually popular culture was very close to scholarly memory and narrative. So there is no divide between the two, and this is why the shadow theater, for example, or the panoramas, not only the big panoramas, but mainly the portable small panoramas with itinerant panoramists, as we call them, people with, it was very cheap, so they had access to a visual culture which was both popular and elite, if we may say. So, but this is a great question, and I think again, it's and we see with folklore as a discipline, because it comes from Germany again, Volkskunde, and also Greece was very much influenced by Germany, as Maria pointed out, and we can understand why the first dynasty, the first king was a Bavarian prince. And so the state was actually founded by the Bavarian elite, by Bavarian officials. But also it was Germany had such an intellectual, how can I say, prestige in the 19th century that Greeks went to Germany to study, came back with ideas. So folklore as a discipline appeared in Greece in the late 19th, early 20th century, and it was institutionalized. And it was very much in line with archaeology and with history. So it made part of the same, let's say, narrative, and also at the university, the scholarly journals, everything was, there was no, between them, there was no difference. They had the same discourse about the nation, I think. So I'm not sure about spontaneity, because many recordings of, various customs were not really spontaneous. They were invented. So, but there are many questions, I think, here.
I just wanted to add briefly. I mean, obviously, Maria knows much more about folklore, but I just wanted to add, because Christina mentioned the Bavarian king of Bavarian origin, that he also contributed very personally to creating what he thought really should be the appropriate Greek folklore by wearing sort of fantasy costumes and so forth. And he came with this idealistic image. And there is an image of him even in exile in Bamberg in Bavaria, after the Greeks chased him out of the country, that he didn't give up on the Greeks and their folklore by still wearing the Greek costume every day. And that's particularly funny, maybe, but that's what's his own personal memory culture he had created.
Yes, absolutely. There is a question from Richard, but I can't see the full question. I shall read what I can see. It says here, Greece has a particularly long and well-recorded history on which to draw. The myth of common ancestry, in Smith's terms, is particularly deep. Does this, and then the question is broken. So we cannot see the question at the moment. So let me go on to the question from Rachel while we are trying to retrieve the question from Richard. So Rachel asks, would the panelists like to comment on the situation regarding the Elgin marbles?
Well, I don't know, maybe.
I would like to comment on Christina's book, yeah, more that how the Elgins are, the marbles are important for identity rather than to talk about this now political issue. We should leave it maybe at the end, yeah?
Yes, if we have time in the end, yeah.
Leave it for the end. So the question, Richard's question, we have David retrieved it, is how. So question, Greece has a particularly long and well-recorded history on which to draw. Does this affect how Greek memory is portrayed? The fact that Greece has a long memory and venerable and well-recorded history. Does this affect?
What question did you read? I don't know. Which one?
Does the fact that Greece has a long recorded history affect how Greek memory portrays it, or how the Greek past is portrayed? The fact that there is such a long history that is recorded, and we so have so much evidence about it. I mean, history is invented by the Greeks, by Herodotus. So does this affect the Greek sense of the past and Greek historical self-consciousness? I think this is what Richard probably means.
Well, talking about the 19th century, and antiquity was rediscovered in the 19th century. So it was even before, of course, it's in the 18th century that not only Greece, it was Western Europe, the West in general, Germany first, France also. They rediscovered there was not. I'm not sure what he means with continuity. We have records, we have material, we have the statues, we have, but how we look upon them, how we understand them, how they are integrated in a continuous narrative of history, this is something new, this is modern, this is modernity. So it's different. If I understand the question, I'm not sure.
I mean, the way I understand the question is Greece has a recorded history through philosophical texts, for example, much beyond before our beginning of time, really, whereas many other countries don't. Like a country like Germany, in the antiquity, even medieval, it's much more sparse than what has been produced in Greece already 1,000 years earlier. So, and maybe the question is having an old and maybe continuous, also through Byzantine period, recorded history, which can be very richly explored, whether this is a kind of maybe this differentiates a country's way of commemorating the past. And my personal view about this is maybe not so much, because historical memory is also a kind of invention, obviously, and therefore, if you don't really have much to draw on, you invent it simply, and you speculate about this, and certainly Germany did, as far as the Germanic tribes go, for example. They didn't really leave many. Certainly not many texts. I mean, there's archaeological evidence about them, but they're in the historical imagination of 19th century nation makers of Germany, they did a lot, and you just add to this, and it's not all based on reality, obviously, but it doesn't really mean that there's less memory production for certain epochs, if I understand the question correctly.
Any more comments? We'll go on. Thank you very much, Rainer. A question from David. How, if at all, do Philhellenes like Lord Byron and Alexander Pushkin play into the development of Greek memory? Is it a strictly elite phenomenon, or does it have broader reach?
Oh, this is a great question. I can, Lord Byron actually had a very, very broad outreach. He became a hero, a national hero for Greece, even for popular strata. So in the Philhellenes, I have a sub-chapter in my book, The Philhellenic Gaze, because actually it was the way the Philhellenes were perceiving the Greek fighters during the War of Independence, how they were painting them, how they were representing them, like Delacroix, for example, or others, that influenced also the way the Greeks themselves were seeing their war and their identity. The Fustanella is a very good example. This is why I am also emphasizing there is a chapter on the Fustanella, because it's not it was not the national costume in the beginning. As we know, the Greek fighters were wearing different kind of clothes, if they were from Crete, if they were from the islands or whatever. So the Fustanella was the clothing of very specific group of fighters. But because it was so exotic, and it was part of the Orientalistic, of course, attitude of the travelers to Greece and to the Orient. So it was reproduced as actually stereotypically in a way as the national costume. So they had a very big impact, I think. Not only it was not just an elite phenomenon. Not so much Pushkin, but Byron and others who came to fight also in the 1820s during the war. They also became heroes, popular heroes, not not an elite thing.
I mean, maybe just to add to this, Byron obviously was a poet by trade, and not that many people read what he was writing beyond a certain educated elite at the time he lived, and maybe also today. But through his life and his, I mean, one could say foolishness of going to Greece and trying to influence the course of the independence fight himself, and collecting fighters and so forth, he did a lot for the perception of the Greek struggle in Europe, obviously, and then influenced many people beyond the elite that would actually consume his poetry. But that was a phenomenon of historical times. And I don't think it depends really on the actual memory culture. Doesn't depend very much on, or not only on what people actually did, but on how they are perceived by others. And obviously in Greece today, in every city, you have the Vivants street and you have some monuments and all this. And so I think also in the general public mind in Greece, people know something about Byron, and there are things about being in school being taught about him. And he was really only, as the question implies, an elite poet who wrote for relatively few people at the time. Although, yes, he was a pop star of poetry in 1820s and 30s Europe. But still, it's really the perception that counts, and not so much what he did and for whom.
And I think, if I may add, again, this ties with the previous question that you asked, Athena, about the high and low perception. The elite, if we call them elite, they may have produced a narrative, but this was so widespread that all the strata of the society could really internalize it, and popular, folk, however you may name it. So there is a flux of moving around of narratives from one group to another. I think this ties together well with the previous question.
Yes.
Of narrative.
And also indirectly, the Greek Revolution, as far as that is concerned, talking about Byron and the great the effervescence that was caused by it in intellectual circles across Europe, one of the effects of this was the indirect, was that Greece becomes the model of national independence, of the struggle for national independence, and the successful struggle at that would inspire the leaders, the elites of other national movements to go ahead after a period of restoration. After 1815, the Congress of Vienna returned to the Ancien Regime. Then the Greek Revolution explodes, and it becomes the model, and becomes they have the domino effect of the 1848 and so on, the great national revolutions and the social revolutions of the rest of the 19th century. So there was an impact, indirect impact as well. There is a question from Aphrodite. Thank you for this discussion, and I look forward to reading the book closely. My question: how does historical memory, as it plays out now in Greece, prevent, with question mark, genuine reconciliation, particularly of the traumas of World War II and the Civil War? Is there any effort for reconciliation based on truth and healing?
Well, as I said during my presentation, in the 80s, there was for the first time, there was an effort. It was PASOK in power at the time, the Socialist Party, and they passed a law to recognize the resistance against the Nazi occupation. In Greek, it is national resistance. And it was a big step towards reconciliation, actually. And after that, there were many scholarly works. There is scholarship on the study of Nazi occupation, on the Civil War, conferences, books, everything. So I think, although sometimes, you know, we read on the social media, but this is not a reliable source, or if we can listen to politicians instrumentalizing the memory or the trauma of the Civil War. In fact, I think that Greek society now is more or less reconciled with that past. Of course, there are still you know, some dark points, but we can see, for example, the Holocaust, the Jewish genocide was, there was nothing about that 20 years ago, and now it is officially recognized. It is taught in the school, etc. So I think that this period, maybe because there is more than half a century that it happened, the Greek society is more mature to deal with it. I'm not so pessimistic about that. I don't know if my colleagues agree, but besides with Rainer, we have been working on similar projects, German-Greek projects together on the memory of the Second World War with students, with postgraduate students, and exchanging trips, and they came to Greece. And I think, yeah, because it is also a question how during the crisis, of course, there was, you know, there was a deterioration and many negative stereotypes against contemporary Germany. But I think this was a kind of parenthesis that ended with the end of the crisis.
A question from Christine Chiriac, French. What role do Greek-Turkish relations play in the performing of the past before 1930, since the book goes up to 1930?
Well, this is a very, very good question. I don't know how to summarize it, but I could say that the relation between Greece and Turkey is really central to Greek historical memory, because it was constructed during even from since 1821 as a conflict between Greeks and Turks, and all the narrative of the past, I mean wars, etc., was exactly about this confrontation between Greeks and Turks, starting with the Greek War of Independence. During the 19th century, the Greek irredentism, the so-called great idea, Megali Idea, was about expanding the Greek territory at the expense of the Ottoman Empire, then the Greek-Turkish War in 1897, then the Balkan Wars, especially the First Balkan War, and then the First World War and the Asia Minor campaign, and the catastrophe, the defeat of the Greeks, and the huge trauma, the big trauma of refugeedom, of the exchange of populations. So the Greek-Turkish relations are in the center of Greek historical memory and national identity. And I give many examples about that, because it is not only an elite thing, it is mainly popular. And this is how we see it in the shadow theater. This is because although the shadow theater is, satirical, it is about Greeks and Turks. And the fustanella, the hero wearing fustanella, and then you have the Karagiozis who is with the Pasha, etc. So it is. This is what I can say very briefly. Thank you for the question.
Maybe I'm far less knowledgeable about this than Christina is, but I would imagine that there is a difference in the role the Greek-Turkish relations play from the time of independence up to, let's say, the early 20th century, when there is a continuous decline of the Ottoman Empire. But then, with the final demise of the Ottoman Empire and the rise of the Turkish national state, that adds another quality of that, because then obviously there is another war, and then the Turks become again a major antagonist of the Greeks. But before that, throughout much of the 19th century, I would imagine that they were obviously playing the historical evil people who had occupied Greece, but they were a sort of a threat of the past. Whereas from the 1920s onwards, they became a threat of the present again, and major opponents. I would just guess this, really.
Yes, the turning point is the founding of the Turkish Republic, 1923. But before that, it was the Ottoman Empire. Although the Young Turk movement created this fear to Greece, and especially Greeks in the Ottoman Empire, of course, and then all the events that followed in the 1910s, and especially, but still it was an internal also Ottoman Empire question, because of course the Kemalists were against the Ottoman, the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman regime. So we have to wait actually till the establishment of the Turkish Republic in 1923 to have this change in the roles between Turkey and Greece. Although, as you know, Venizelos and Ataturk inaugurated a different phase in Greek-Turkish relations, friendship, etc. This was a very different period, despite the traumatic memory of the exchange of populations. Venizelos and Ataturk tried to launch a new policy between the two countries. Of course, this created the reaction of the refugees in Greece, but this is a long story. Maybe if I continue with the 30s, as you suggested, I can elaborate more on that.
Can I ask about Karagiozis? Is this, can we say that Karagiozis continues from before the Greek Revolution, or is it does it start after the Greek Revolution? What is this folk tradition? Do we see this continuity with the same stories continuing into the independent Greek state? Or is there a transformation in the stories of Karagiozis, the shadow theater?
I don't know. I can start, and Maria can continue. Karagiozis was an Ottoman shadow theater. It was not Greek. So when the Greek state is founded, there's no Karagiozis in Greece. The first plays in Greece, mainly in Athens, are in late 19th century. And then they take the stories of the Ottoman theater and they adjust, they nationalize them. And they have new stories, of course, which become very popular very quickly in early 20th century. So a new tradition is created with the Greek Karagiozis, but his ancestor is Karagios, which means black eyes. Black-eyed. Yeah, Maria, maybe you want to add to this.
No, I agree with you, Christina. So Karagiozis is an Ottoman tradition which was adopted by the Greeks. And I guess the question is if there is a continuity in the themes, in the performances, if they start with something else and then they change the plays. I think, and this is what Christina very nicely writes in her book, Karagiozis had two topics, the Greek Revolution and then antiquity with Alexander the Great, only one play. That was the popular themes of Karagiozis. And of course, nowadays in the 20th century, of course, they created more modern, if you want, stories. But this is in the 20th century, much later, about modern life. But then at the end of 19th century, it was revolution, Greeks and Turks, the Serai on the one side and the Greek, the hat of Karagiozis. Mostly revolution, and then the Alexander the Great. Nothing. I don't think we can trace continuity if this was the question that you had. Yeah.
Yes. It's interesting how you have this persistence of an Ottoman tradition.
Yeah.
In the urban centers that it's revived, and it's not just in the villages where you can see this tradition persisting, but it's in the urban centers that it is revived and it becomes Greek, which is, I think, very, very interesting.
The popular show, it was not, in the urban centers, but in the poor neighborhoods.
I used to go and watch Karagiozis in Varkiza, and
yeah, but this is recently because we're talking about the interwar period.
Yeah, a question from Saul. I think I'm right in saying that Greece was industrializing around the time of the revolution and into the early 20th century. Does this just change the physical means of producing and reproducing memory, or does it also affect how it is understood?
Well, maybe I can just say something about this because I have written a little study on the Industrial Revolution in Europe, and it raises an important issue, I think, here, because the physical means of producing memory and spreading it is very important in that. And for example, communication structures, educational facilities, and so forth. But no, you're not right in saying this. Greece was industrializing since the 1830s, because this is really 1820s, 1830s is the time when industrialization really takes off in Great Britain. This is the focus of earlier industrialization, and then Western European countries come into play, 1850s, 1860s, and Greece never really became an industrial country. It jumped sort of from an agrarian economy to a service economy sometime in the 20th century and after the Second World War, and long into the 20th century after the Second World War, it stayed really a predominantly agrarian economy. But this definitely has had effects on means of spreading memory culture. as I say, I mean, Christina obviously knows more about the memory culture, but the industrial basis for this was not a given in Greece.
Yes, that was the sadness of the Ottoman Empire, that it wasn't like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or even the Russian Empire. It remained so-called backward in this respect, I would say.
Well, it is a myth that all Europe was industrialized in the 19th century, you know, and of course Rainer knows that better. We think that all the countries were like
so-called
like England, but this was not the case. Even France was industrialized very late. Germany, of course, it was the second industrial revolution in late 19th century. And there is not only one way to industrialize. Greece had a first industrialization in 1860s and 1870s, and the same happened with the Ottoman Empire at that time. And there were banks also, and we had a different different model of development. There was a middle class, but activities were different. For example, there was a fleet and commerce, and they were mainly merchants. So they had a different. Of course, there was no industry, but they had capitalist activities, if I may say. But Greece, when industrialization started in the 60s and 70s, then they were not lucky, because the first repression happened. The first big repression. Is it repression we call it? I think there is a crisis. Depression. Sorry, the depression. Yeah, exactly. So they couldn't profit. So then it went down. The industrialization, and it was after in 1923 when 1.2 million refugees came to Greece. So there was cheap working force that could be used to industrialize the country. And actually in the 1920s, there was a big, I think, industrialization rhythm. But of course, the quality of the industries, but we cannot discuss it here. We cannot discuss it here.
We don't have any other questions at the moment. Would the panelists like to think a little bit about, go back to the question about the Parthenon sculptures, and maybe think about the first request from Athens, apparently I think it's 1842, for the Parthenon sculptures to be returned to Greece.
Athena, may I interrupt? May I make a comment about the book? Yeah, because I had it in mind all these days. It's not about the Parthenon sculptures. Or may I make this comment? Yes. I would like to say that there are some things. Here is the Greek book, the Greek edition.
The English book.
And that's the English one. And I would like to mention that there are some things lost in translation. And of course, this is inevitable, as we all know. And the first thing is the title. Yeah, the Greek title is so, captivating. Fustanellas and chlamysis, so ancient garments. And which really, I think, manifests in two words what is all this, all this problematic about. And so I would urge our audience to learn modern Greek now, study modern Greek and read the original in Greek, yeah, and also visit Greece and see all these beautiful sites that Christina mentions, yeah. Just to make this comment about the Greek translation into English, yeah.
Thank you. This was a discussion about the title. Sorry, Rainer. Yeah, I interrupted.
No, I mean, I don't really have much of an opinion or an informed opinion about the so-called Elgin marbles, but maybe a bit drawing a bit of a wider picture here. I mean, the British Museum, and in fact many museums worldwide, would be pretty empty if everybody makes claims and for return. The Elgin marbles are a particular case in point, since they have been reclaimed for so many decades, and it has become sort of a little bit of a fetish of reclaiming things. But many countries have issues with that. Germany, for example, relatively recently, and about 100 years later, returned some very precious artifacts to former African colonies of Germany. But it took 100 years to do this. And there were museums built in Togo, for example, that could house them properly. Yeah? And then finally Germany sort of said, okay, let's move them. But this is the case in many different international relations, and the Elgin marbles are only maybe the most famous example of this.
Now, the difference, if I may, is that there are artifacts, and here you have a monument. And parts of the monument are missing. It is not the same as a statue. It is different to claim Aphrodite, Venus of Milos from Louvre, because it is a statue. This is similar to what you said. It is different to say that this is a monument. Well, actually, it is not a national monument. It is an ecumenical monument, I think. So this is, if you want to have, let's say, Notre Dame, you have Notre Dame in Paris, and a part of Notre Dame is, I don't know, in the US, in New York. And then you say, we have to have the monument as an integral monument. This is a different argumentation, I think. And it is, we shouldn't think it in national terms, but we should think in cultural terms. If we think it in cultural terms and in terms of heritage, of cultural, of ecumenical cultural heritage, then we can understand this claim. Of course, some Greeks think it is a national cause, and I think this is wrong. This is my answer to. But about the title, I will come back to the title, because, you know, we authors like very much to discuss titles. And it was, if I translated the same title, it would be incomprehensible to an English audience. Although, thank you very much for saying that, Maria, it condenses the book, which is about identity and visualizing identity, Greek identity. If you're a tourist and you come to Athens, what are you going to take as a souvenir with you? You will take an ancient statue and a tsolia, a small doll wearing a fustanella. So this is how also the tourists, the West in general, but the world in general, represents Greece. This is the imagination about Greece. So this is why I choose these two garments to illustrate a national identity, because I wanted to emphasize the materiality of identity. And this is the representation and the performance of identity, because this is it's more, as I said, irrational and emotional. But unfortunately, the English publisher, of course, wanted another title, so I used something which is very, very descriptive, like historical memory in Greece. So that's it. But thank you so much for your nice words. It was yeah.
Thank you.
Both of you, I mean.
Can I ask, I think probably a last question? When one thinks of memory, one thinks of Ernest Renan and his famous lecture at the Sorbonne in 1882, Qu'est-ce qu'une nation? What is a nation? Where he mentions forgetting. Can we say that there has been an attempt in Greek, in the history of Greek memory, to forget moments of division and conflict? Or do we really see the affirmation and recognition of conflict and the attempt, as you said, to reconcile. And one of our members of the audience asked, do we have this phenomenon that Renan was recommending, that every nation has to forget as well as remember in order to build the solidarity that is needed? And we've seen with the German historiography, it is a matter of really remembering and reconciling, coming to terms with the past. Can we see this in Greece?
Since you mentioned Germany, I could probably say, I mean, we have a relatively similar, or had a similar phenomenon to Greece dealing with the civil war period, which was very painful for Greece, and then initially forgotten, deliberately forgotten by the public and maybe also by many professional historians. And that was the same with the Nazi period in Germany. Until the late 1970s, very few people wanted to talk about it in Germany. Only then, slowly, but then increasingly fast, there was this avalanche of memorializing the Nazi period. But if you think about the first 3 decades after it happened, there was very much forgetting involved. So I think it's really a cycle in history, also throughout past centuries, that various generations ask various questions and create different kinds of memories. So, and forgetting is always an important part, but then it is also the reclaiming of what has been forgotten is another part in that.
Victims reclaim what has been forgotten in general, as you know. And I very much agree with you, Rainer, that there are phases when we can somehow give a chronology of forgetting and remembering. When a traumatic event happens, then it is remembered. It is not forgotten. And because you have conflicts, this was the case, for example, to talk about Greece, with Capodistria, the first president of the Greek state. After his assassination in 1831, the two groups, the ones who were pro-Capodistrian and the others who were against Capodistrian, the ones who were celebrating his assassination and the others were mourning. And it continued for decades. And it was only after the biological cycle of the protagonists finished, meaning that those who lived the event died, that the forgetting started. And it was a deliberate forgetting because there was an urge to forget, just as Renan said in 1882 that we need to forget in order to be together. And this deliberate decision was obvious in the historiography, in the political parties, everywhere. But when something else happened, I mean, another traumatic event happened, then all of a sudden they remembered the previous one. So there are cycles, as Rainer said, that we can really follow. And I think this is more or less the pattern that I described.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Right. I think we can bring our fascinating discussion to an end. And I am very proud to say that I have a copy of Fustanelli's Kyklamides on my bedside table. And I lent it to my mother, who also loved it. And then it went back to my bedside table. Thank you all for joining us to discuss Professor Koulouri's book. I thank Professor Kaliambou and Professor Liedtke for their excellent comments, and I hope that we're all now inspired to buy either the Greek or the English translation, or both, and compare them. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Many thanks to David for
Thank you, Athena. You were a wonderful host for all of us. Thank you for organizing this, and I would like to be together in